Citizen Kane is regarded as one of the two or three, if not the greatest film ever made by most people that know what they're talking about. I am one of those people. Citizen Kane was made in 1941, which is off-putting to many people because they believe that older films are of lower quality and up to a lower standard, and a lot of them think that those are boring films. Well, not really. And up to a certain point, the really old movies, from the 20s and the 30s, when we were just learning how to make movies, a lot of the silent films, you might point to those films that have not been restored as an example of lower quality. But the filmmaking techniques had always been there. It has been said by many people that Orson Welles, at the age of 25, in his feature film debut, had done something that had never been done before. He had taken all of the tools available to him at the emergence of sound in films, and he had created a new type of narrative film, which was a turning point. I think that's true in a lot of ways. Most of what has been said about Citizen Kane has already been said. The best things have already been said. But a lot of people praise the technical innovations rather than the story. And I've never understood that. That has always irked me, because I think the story and the character, those are the best aspects of the film as far as I'm concerned. So I will try to provide some insight as to what the film is really about. Of course, it's all about a man's life. It's a character study, one of the first of its kind. And Orson Welles, one of his famous quotes, pretty much summarizes the meaning of the film. He says that we are born alone and we die alone, and it's only through the relationships with others that we can manifest the illusion that our lives have meaning. I'm paraphrasing slightly. And that's a very profound thing to say. That is essentially the entire plot of Citizen Kane. The film opens with the death of the main character, which is quite the innovation and quite startling. Very counterintuitive, you would think. A lot of films have come along and stolen that idea. Lawrence of Arabia is one of the main examples. Raging Bull is another. There are many examples where the narrative is told in flashback, starting with the beginning, being the ending, and then retracing the steps. That was copied almost right away. And there are so many different narrative devices used to channel time, to manipulate time, and to show decades in a matter of seconds. Genius stuff that we take for granted today, but was entirely new in that time period, and with that film. Some people will say that the ending is very sad and dark and tragic. I don't think so. I think it's a very uplifting ending. Charles Foster Kane's life is literally up in smoke. They're burning all of his possessions, and they're looking at the entire film for meaning, and they destroy the evidence. Of course, that's a great example of dramatic irony. But I think it's uplifting, because the imagery is all about this man who closed himself away from the world. He didn't want to let anyone in, and you couldn't get to know him. And that's what the message of the film is about, that you can't get to know someone. We're going to die alone, and that's all there is to it. And you can't summarize a person's life with just a word. As the reporter says, The key moments in the film to me that stand out, I think the introduction to the character, I think it's the greatest introduction of all time. It does definitely belong to Orson Welles. It's in Citizen Kane, I believe, rather than The Third Man. And he presents himself as someone who doesn't take his business too seriously, but as soon as, he gets pressed far enough, he says, well, I'm a man who has money and property, and if I don't look after the underprivileged, maybe somebody else will. Maybe somebody without money or property. That would be too bad. And so he doesn't care about money at first. He just wants to do right by the people. And it's never fully explained, nor does it really need to be, because how can you explain many things if many factors have to be at play for why he becomes corrupt at certain parts. Another great scene is when Leland says that he married for love. That's the reason that he did anything. And that's how he lost it all. He didn't have enough love to give. Then there's the scene where, if you buy a bag of peanuts in this town, you get a song written for you. That is, I think, one of the two most important scenes in the entire film. Because they sing him a song and they say, well, he's a man with wealth and fame, and he's still the same. But that's not really true. That's the entire meaning of the film, that he's not the same with wealth and fame. He never cared for wealth and fame. He was taken away from his mother. He was taken away from the only life he really knew and cared about. And that was the start of his downturn. But it's a really fun scene, and a movie that needs a scene like that. I think it's proof that there's so much life and vigor to the film. And that's the most fun moment for me. The other moment that stands out is when he first meets Susan and he talks about going to see his mother's warehouse. He talks about a sort of a sentimental journey. And that's what the film is all about. It's a sentimental journey. And there are many other powerful moments. But the reason it's considered to be the greatest film of all time, I think a lot has to do with the technical innovations, but more than that, it's just the most philosophical film ever made, I think, other than 2001. And just, there's so much reality in this movie. Nothing else has ever come close. There's never been really another character study. It's not a straightforward character study because it's more of a life in through the eyes of other people. But it's an essential film for anyone who likes movies. And the fact that it's in black and white doesn't mean anything, because a lot of black and white films are better in black and white, because you get away from all the distractions. And if being in black and white is too much of a distraction, then it's really not for you, I suppose. But it's not about being flashy and technical. It's about the characters and the human interaction that's going on. And it's the source point of modern movies. That's all there is to it. I think the only films that rival it really, 2001, because it does everything that Citizen Kane does. It is just as influential in a lot of ways, but instead of being about the human moments, it's about technology. It's about where we came from and where we're going, and it's answering different questions and asking different questions in Citizen Kane. But those are the peaks you reach, and then it's downhill.